There are lots of names being tossed around about the Pittsburgh Steelers and who they should approach in free agency. But there is one name on the offensive line that makes perfect sense. And yes, it's going to be a little costly, but it's one that fits the Steelers' need now and long term without any question. And it's the only free agent offensive tackle that they should approach once the market opens. What's going on, everybody? I'm Noah Strackmine. Thank you for jumping on to Steelers to Go, your daily to-go cup of Pittsburgh Steelers news and analysis. Find us on youtube.com/allsteelerstalk and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. And today, I'm going to talk about Orlando Brown, an offensive tackle that I think the Pittsburgh Steelers should approach immediately and should be the biggest name that they sign in free agency without any question. Not just because he's worthy of a big contract, but because he fits the Pittsburgh Steelers' needs now, later, and is a problem solver. That's the thing. The Pittsburgh Steelers have signed a lot of players in the last 2 or 3 years that haven't been problem solvers. They're just guys that are coming in to fill a need, whether it's for a year or 2 years max. I think outside of James Daniels, the Pittsburgh Steelers have avoided any long-term filler, for lack of a better word, for the last 3 seasons, possibly more. This year, there's a name on the market. That name is Orlando Brown, who's going to be looking for a big contract, who deserves a big contract, and who, for the Pittsburgh Steelers, can solve their left tackle issue with a young quarterback and say, hey, we feel confident that this guy is the future of that position, and we no longer have to worry about it. And I get that there are a lot of people that still defend Dan Moore. There are a lot of people that still want to say, hey, well, there's cheaper options out there like Taylor Lewan. Realistically, the Pittsburgh Steelers do not solve anything long-term with either of those answers. With Orlando Brown, you now have a solution. You now have a solidified starter, a Pro Bowler, a 3-time Pro Bowler, in a guy that is protecting your young quarterback's blind side, the most important spot on an offensive line. It doesn't seem like a position that you play games with. It doesn't seem like a position that you risk anything with. And with Orlando Brown out there in free agency, and if the Steelers can pull off the money, it makes total sense. Let's talk about why. For one, Brown, and I know that he just said that he made 3 Pro Bowls, but he actually made 4 Pro Bowls and is the only tackle to make a Pro Bowl in the last 4 seasons. Clearly, he's at the top of his game. On top of that, he allowed just 4 sacks last season and 39 pressures. No sack came after week 15, and just 2 sacks came after week 9 against the Tennessee Titans. He did not allow a sack in the playoffs, which is by far the most important time to not give up any pressures. On top of that, Orlando Brown is sitting here at just 26 years old. He'll be 27 at the beginning of the league year, or at the beginning of the season. And there's zero question whether or not this guy's got a long career ahead of him. At 26 years old, you could get another 7 years out of this guy easy, feel very confident about it, and not have to worry about that position for 6 or 7 years. And if you sign him to a long-term deal, long enough where you don't have to stress about it, the guy's 31 years old before he gets out of his current contract, and you have to worry about the next deal. At that moment, you talk about the money. What is the money? According to Spotrac, his estimated market value is $22.4 million a year. That's 5 years, $112 million. He would be the 3rd highest paid left tackle in the NFL and the 32nd ranked offensive tackle to be paid within the league. Just for comparisons, the Steelers are only paying Chuks for 3 years, $29.25 million. That's $13 million this season. It's a huge spike. It's a contract way bigger than the Pittsburgh Steelers are used to paying these guys. But after years of struggle on the offensive line, and the best thing that anybody could say about this group heading into 2023 is, oh, there was progression at the end of 2022. That's awesome. Progression is good. It's not good enough to say, hey, this is the future of the position. Hey, Dan Moore or Taylor Lewan or Kevin Dotson or Chuks Okorafor or whoever that you want to bring up within that mix and talk about, oh, well, it leads to promise, outmatches the promise that Orlando Brown instantly brings to the Pittsburgh Steelers. There are no more questions. You now have the ability to go build the rest of that offensive line. Just think about it. Chuks Okorafor is under contract for the next 2 seasons. After that, you have to worry about signing him again. But truthfully, I think he got paid way more than he was worth in this last contract, and his next one's not going to be as high. You have James Daniels, who's under contract for another season and will definitely get another contract afterwards. Mason Cole, who's under contract for another season and will likely get another contract afterwards. Even if people want to talk about replacing him, he has become an anchor of that offensive line, and I think the group loves him. Kevin Dotson, he's at the end of his rookie deal, and I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers are eyeing up more inside offensive linemen than outside offensive linemen in the NFL draft. I could see a guy like Osiris Torrance coming in and filling that spot after a year sitting behind Kevin Dotson and working with him. And then if you have Orlando Brown on the other side of that with Dan Moore playing swing tackle, and hey, guess what? If in a year Chuks Okorafor doesn't work out, but you still have a lot of faith in Dan Moore, move him to the right side where he more naturally plays, where he played in college. And you can feel a lot better about that situation. But you're telling me that walking into the season with Dan Moore, Kevin Dotson, Mason Cole, James Daniels, and Chuks Okorafor with Trent Scott as your swing tackle is a better option than walking in there with Orlando Brown, Kevin Dotson, Osiris Torrance, Mason Cole, James Daniels, and Chuks Okorafor with Dan Moore as your swing tackle? Come on. The Pittsburgh Steelers have been searching for that for a long, long time. And I get it. They have to create cap space. They have to create a lot of cap space. But they could do it. And they don't have too many holes to fill in order to get that done. Think about it. Let's say Cam Sutton gets overpaid, $10 million. Boom. Let's say that you sign an inside linebacker for $6 to $8 million. Okay, that's $18 million. You sign Terrell Edmonds to $4 million. That's $22 million. DeMonte Kazee to $3 million. That's $25 million. You sign Larry Ogunjobi to $4 million. That's $29 million that you need to come up with. All of your necessary moves have been made at that moment. You can now head to the NFL draft and you have little starters to worry about. Actually, you don't have a single starter to worry about anywhere. Then you go out and drop $23 million on Orlando Brown, and you're sitting there at 62, I believe, $62 million. You could come up with $62 million. It's not that hard. And everybody's going to well, they have $1 million right now. They do have $1 million right now. You figure out a way to work out Mitch Trubisky's cap hit, and you should be able to clear up at least $6, maybe $7 million of that. You find a way to rework some deals. You could come up with way more. You cut William Jackson. That's another 12. I think it's very possible for the Pittsburgh Steelers to come up with $65 million this offseason and just make things work. You have 3 huge contracts. You have the ability to extend Myles Jack and lower his cap hit. You have the ability to add void years to Mitch Trubisky. It is easy for the Pittsburgh Steelers to come up with $40+ million this offseason in cap space. Omar Khan said he's not worried about it at all. He's been a genius with that situation for a long time, and I trust him more than anything now that he's the general manager and this is his team. And I think that's what gives me a little bit of faith that maybe they will make a push and maybe will make a splash in free agency, is that Omar Khan seems a little bit aggressive right now. He seems like a general manager who's out to prove that his first offseason is a winning offseason and that he's going to set this team in the right direction. And I get that everybody around him is talking about, oh, well, Dan Moore Jr. played well. Dan Moore Jr. played well. The free agency class is outside of Orlando Brown, and the NFL draft class is outside of maybe 2 tackles. One of them plays left tackle. One of them might be a center. very questionable additions to replace Dan Moore with. But once you bring Orlando Brown into the mix, there's no questions. There's no, well, maybe he's not as good. Maybe there's not as much upside. No, there's a ton more upside. The guy's one of the best left tackles in football. The Pittsburgh Steelers need a left tackle desperately. And it makes total sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers to take some risk, make some moves, and have to struggle a little bit when it comes to the salary cap to go out and sign a huge name, Orlando Brown. Don't let this one slip. If you're trying to protect Kenny Pickett, protect his blind side. For a quarterback that gets hit a lot, for a quarterback who now has concussion history, for a quarterback who you guys see as the future, who the Pittsburgh Steelers see as the future, and who are keeping a backup quarterback because they're so worried about if their starter goes down, maybe they should spend a little bit more time figuring out how to protect him well. And I think Orlando Brown is the easy answer there. It makes total sense in every facet. And I get that you have to figure out the salary cap situation. And I get that the Pittsburgh Steelers will have to maneuver and work their magic. And Omar Khan will have to become the magician of the salary cap that he is. But he didn't get the GM job just because everybody likes him. He got the GM job because he's that good at what he does. Coming up with $22.5 million to spend on top of what they already plan to spend, doable. And I think the Steelers have an easy option when it comes to at least negotiating with Orlando Brown and trying to bring a Pro Bowl left tackle to the city of Pittsburgh.